Hi, welcome to the Gay Liberation Network on CAN TV. My name is Andy Thayer, and tonight we're going to be discussing a recent kiss-in the south suburb of Alsip. Just a little background, we're going to be joined shortly by Frank Nielsen, who was one of the two young men who basically exchanged a kiss in this south suburban restaurant, and a manager who actually turned out to be the owner came over and berated them in a very loud voice for having just simply exchanged a kiss in a south suburban restaurant. It was pretty outrageous that this manager made a big scene about this, because supposedly Cook County, as well as the entire state of Illinois, are both covered by ordinances that say that gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people have equal access to public accommodations. But apparently this whole notion that gays and lesbians might be showing affection was completely anathema to this manager. The same sort of conduct that was tolerated in that same restaurant between differently sexed patrons was verboten so far as this manager was concerned. And we've got some photographs of that action. I'll just put a few up on our screen here. This was as action gathered. A number of people were very angry about the fact that this manager decided that gay people were not entitled to display the same kind of behaviors as straight people were in this restaurant. And so a whole number of people gathered and proceeded to rally a little bit before the action. And here we see GLN's Bob Schwartz addressing some of the crowd. Bob took the opportunity to read the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance that specifically guarantees gay people the same right to public accommodations as straight people. And that's really our point here, that if you're going to say that it's okay for straight couples to exchange a kiss in a restaurant, then gay people should be as well. We've got a few more pictures here of what happened during the course of the action. Here we show the crowd coming over from another parking lot over to the action. We had a good group, probably certainly as many as 75, maybe as many as 100 people joined in the action. Here we have Frank, who's on the far right, sort of his head is hidden there, and his partner Danny sitting down. A bunch of camera crews who had been tipped off to the action came, and you see some of those on the left-hand side of your screen there. And they were basically recording what was going on at this action last Friday night. There we have Frank on the left, with his partner Danny. They were served this time. They were served last time as well. They ordered some drinks and an appetizer, and the whole incident occurred after each of them had just had a couple bites to eat. The restaurant manager came storming over, created a big scene, and they felt not welcome there, and so they decided they wanted to leave. The manager insisted on their paying, even though they'd had only a couple of bites to eat, and so they threw a $20 bill on the table and went out of the restaurant. Here, the ironic thing was that not only did heterosexual couples typically embrace and show affection, that right above the very table where Frank and Dan were seated was this mural. It's a little hard to see in this photograph here, but it shows a heterosexual couple engaged in a far more passionate kiss than anything that Frank and Danny were doing in the particular night in question back in May. So pretty outrageous that La Azteca Fiesta, I should say La Fiesta Azteca, would make a big scene about it. Now, at the action, we had basically the entire restaurant filled with gay and lesbian patrons, as well as our supporters, who were eventually finally served. At a certain point, the manager threatened to throw everyone out because we allegedly weren't ordering anything. The fact of the matter is the manager had ordered his people to not take anyone's orders. Here is a table full of people who were finally granted the right to order, and they did order drinks, and of course we tipped well because the patrons were not, I should say the wait staff was not the people that were the problem. The problem was the anti-gay management that treated Frank and Dan so poorly. So that's why we had the action, was that if this restaurant was going to make such a big deal about a gay couple kissing the way that any heterosexual couple would kiss in a public establishment, or anyone who's ever ridden the Chicago Transit Authority knows, you see young heterosexual couples pawing each other endlessly oft times, and yet no one thinks anything of it. Before we go further in our show, I'd like to put another overhead up on so you can see some of the things that are coming up forward with the Gay Liberation Network. We've got our annual Pride contingent that is going to be meeting at the corner of Diversey and Halsted Street at 10 a.m. on the last Sunday of the month. Anyone who's interested in working in favor of LGBT equal rights and liberation, we invite you to join the contingent. It's going to be meeting at 10 a.m. on Sunday, June 27th at the corner of Diversey and Halsted, and we invite you to be part of that. Also, in terms of other things that are coming up, we've got our next Gay Liberation Network meeting, which is going to be on the first Wednesday of each month, and that's going to be Wednesday, July 7th at the Burger Park Cultural Center, corner of Sheridan Road and Granville Avenue. And then finally, just information about the next GLN television show here on CAN TV. It's going to be on, oops, sorry, that got a little bit screwed up on the screen there. The next one is going to be the 2nd July in second Friday in July here on CAN TV channel 21. So I understand that we do have a caller on the air. Joe?
Hey, Andy, how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you tonight?
Andy, I'm doing fine, but I hope we can have a reasonable, respectful dialogue. The bottom line is this, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
If something like that in a restaurant, people are not used to seeing. It's just like if a woman was in a restaurant, even though, like, she's a woman and she was breastfeeding her baby, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a man and all that. I would want to see a woman breastfeeding her baby, all right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about something that people may not be used to seeing. And we got to have somewhere, a middle ground where we can meet on certain things. Just like I would want to see a couple making out, a couple of different sexes.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to see a couple making out in a restaurant. Like you could be talking about, it could be like an innocent kid, like on the cheek, like two brothers or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is this. People are not used to seeing it, and it's going to provoke certain type of reaction. Can't we agree on that?
Yeah, well, no, I'm afraid we can't, Joe, because the fact of the matter is that heterosexual couples make out in restaurants and on the CTA all the time. I hear that all the time, Joe, and no, I don't see anyone storming up to them and saying, oh, you've got to stop this and everything else. You never see that, Joe. And yet, when Frank and Danny did that, they were treated abysmally. And I'm happy to say that Frank Nielsen has joined me here in the studio. Frank, if you could just recap for our listeners, I gave a little bit of a preview of what happened back in May. Give a short idea of what happened. Tell our listeners what happened back in May and why you decided to launch this action the other Friday night.
Well, sure. Thank you, Andy, for having me on. I appreciate it. Well, what had happened was my boyfriend Danny Hankus and I went into the restaurant, and we sat down just to have some food. And after 2 sips of my drink and 2 bites of my food, an unidentified man came up to us and said, I know that you two are in love or whatever, but you need to stop doing what you're doing and calm down. This is a family restaurant, and if you don't stop doing what you're doing, you're going to have to leave. And what we were doing was we were kissing on the mouth, like some pecks, and we were kissing on the cheek, again, some pecks. Nothing that I would say would be obscene or over the top or anything that was nasty.
Nothing that any of us haven't seen in any number of different restaurants or on the L or on the bus or whatever. You never see anyone making a scene about that.
No, not at all.
Just here is a picture of Frank and Danny, and on agreed upon signal during the action the other Friday night, the two of them clinked some glasses, and everyone kissed.
Oh, everyone, yeah.
Everyone kissed. So the homophobia that this owner of this restaurant displayed was repaid with more gay kissing than he
knew what to do with.
He knew what to do with. But it was all non-sexual. It was just affectionate, and that was the end of it. That should have been the end of it, except for the manager decided to make a big scene that night as well. Why don't you describe a little bit what happened that night, Frank?
When we got into the restaurant, it seemed that they were only serving the table that Danny and I were sitting at, and it was apparent that the manager had instructed his wait staff not to wait on any of the other people that were a part of the action. And finally, I think I heard that you had gone over and said something to someone because he was asking us to leave. He said, if you aren't going to order any food, you have to leave. But the fact of the matter was he was stopping us from getting any food to begin with.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously that's a clear sign of him, of his homophobia, of him not wanting us in there at all. I'd say it was successful. There was really only one person that came up and expressed their displeasure what was going on, but I had a few people that weren't a part of our action at all that were in the restaurant and said, I really like what you're doing. What you're really doing is important, to let people know that homophobia is still rampant. It's still out there. It's still happening,
Right. Well, and as if to underscore the double standard, there was this picture right above where Frank and Danny were sitting, showing this very passionate kiss, far more passionate than anything we mustered that night. And this was apparently put up with the full approval of that same manager who said, oh, this is a family restaurant. We can't have gay couples kissing here and so forth. So it really is the double standard. And I think what this goes to is while people may have, quote unquote, no problem with equal employment protection and even equal housing protection, you scratch the surface of a lot of Americans and there is still a very deep-seated homophobia that when it comes to anything that might be even remotely interpreted as gay sex, then they have this visceral anti-gay reaction to. I can remember watching the Fox News coverage of our action, and the Fox News coverage was frankly pretty biased against us, as you would expect out of Fox News. But they had a rating meter going at the same time saying, who approves of this action, who disapproves of it, and so forth. And unfortunately, we were losing quite a bit. I mean, it said something about the level of homophobia that is very much rampant right here in Chicago, and we think of ourselves as relatively liberated here in
people.
Chicago. We've got full panoply of equal rights legislation. Aside from equal marriage rights, we've got pretty much everything else, at least locally. And yet you have this very virulent homophobia on display. It reminded me when I was in Russia a few weeks back. One of our Russian friends was able to get on a national, actually the single most viewed national news program for a debate with some homophobes. And they were running one of those meters too.
Yeah.
And we were losing big time. I think we had 15% in favor. So you can have equal rights legislation. You can think everything's all fine and dandy on Halsted Street or up in Andersonville, but the reality is that homophobia is very much alive and well in this country, even in places like Chicago. So, we do have another caller here, and so let's hear what Dean has to say.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to say that it's important that you guys have forums like this.
Thank you.
It's really important. I'm an African American, and the question that I pose to you, gentlemen, is that you all being victims of sexism, because that's exactly what it is, are you able to empathize and understand and relate to racism, and if so, how?
I would hope so. I mean, certainly the whole notion of people having the right to have equal access to public accommodations was something that was trailblazed by the African American Civil Rights Movement back in the 1960s. I mean, a lot of the same arguments that are mustered against us is, oh, this is my private business and I should be able to run my family restaurant the way I want, are not unlike what African American protesters faced when they tried to sit down at lunch counters in places like Greensboro, North Carolina. Private business people said, well, you know, whatever the government does is one thing, but I'm going to run my restaurant or my lunch counter the way I want to. Those same arguments, which were very difficult arguments at the time, were trailblazed by African American civil rights protesters. And the fact of the matter is that so many people in the LGBT community are not only gay, but they're Latino or Asian or African American or some combination thereof, that I've always felt it was important for us to, if we're going to have our rainbow, you see in our background here, if we're going to have our rainbow LGBT community united, we can't just talk about gay issues. We can't just be concerned with gay issues. We need to address all the special demands of people who are discriminated against within our community.
I agree.
And that's why I'm very proud to say that we in the Gay Liberation Network are, for example, very involved in the immigrant rights struggle. And it's no accident that many of the same people that you see who are anti-gay are also racist, anti-immigrant. I mean, we had the spectacle not too many years ago of Jim Oberweis running for this. He ran for like 4 or 5 different offices. You know, his big thing was to be anti-immigrant, where he showed those campaign commercials of the soldier field being, you know, inundated with immigrants and so forth. Well, Jim Oberweis was also a big supporter of the anti-gay constitutional amendment ballot question that was proposed for the Illinois ballot. And he worked very closely with the Illinois Family Institute as well as Americans for Truth About Homosexuality, 2 virulently anti-gay outfits, and as well as pairing up with the Minutemen and other anti-Latino and anti-immigrant organizations. So I hope that answers your point. Do you have something to say about that, Frank?
I would just say that I've been inspired by the civil rights movement. I mean, learning about that throughout history, I mean, that's really where I draw my strength from, is everything that's happened in the past. The civil rights movement is something that I look to with this, you know, with this whole idea of a kiss-in, of a sit-in. It's we draw our inspiration from that time in history. So it was. If it wasn't for the things that had happened in the past, I really don't think we would be this far at all, and where we're at right now. So.
And really, the what's seen as the birth of the modern gay rights movement with the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969, everyone universally acknowledges is that would not have happened in the absence of a strong African American civil rights movement and the struggles for equality of women and Latinos and others. Well, we're just about out of time here. I just wanted to again call our listeners' attention to a few things coming up. We've got the annual Gay Pride Parade and, of course, the Gay Liberation Network. Each year we have a contingent in the Pride Parade, and we invite you to join us. If you want to get involved in the contingent, just suggest that you drop us an email at lgbtliberation@aol.com with your cell phone number. It's literally hundreds of thousands of people converging on one neighborhood in Chicago, so it's easy to get lost. We are tentatively meeting up at 10 a.m. at the corner of Diversity and Halsted, though the parade organizers typically a week before the thing give us another location to be meeting at. And then finally, just check out our website if you want to find out more about the Gay Liberation Network. That's www.gayliberation.net. This has been Andy Thayer with Frank Nielsen. Thanks so much for watching tonight, and be proud. This is Gay Pride Month, and thanks for watching tonight.